And Block Gemara. We are up to today Daf Pei Zayin Amid Aleph. Says the Gemara, the Mishnah we just learned about a Bas Yisrael, and she got if she got married, if she got engaged, and all that. She does not eat truma yet until she actually is married. And then we also learned that if she had a son from the husband that was a Yisrael, then she can still not, even she's a Bas Kohen, she cannot eat truma as long as she has a son from a Yisrael and so on. So it says the Gemara, and then we went through, she married a Kohen, then she married a Levi, then she married Yisrael. So even if the child of Yisrael died, if she still had a child of a Levi, she could only eat Namaiser, but she cannot go back to truma yet. Says the Gemara, but Mezbuna, the Levi, but if her son from the husband who's a Levi died, then Teichel. With truma, she can go ahead and eat truma because she has a son from her husband, a Kohen, and therefore she can go ahead and eat truma. Now we know before that if she was a Bas Kohen and she has no children, she goes back home. Now we're saying that she's a Bas Yisrael, married to a Kohen, had a son. Then she married a Levi, she no longer can eat truma. Had a son from the Levi. Then the son from the Levi died. She goes back to the situation of having a son from a Kohen. So the Gemara, how do you know that the son also has a right to give her back that entitlement that she can go ahead and eat from her son? Says the Gemara, how do you know that? It says, it could have said, we had this a few times before already. It says that a Bas Kohen, if she's an Almana and her children, goes back to family. It says Ubas and a daughter, coming to include something else. And that is, that not only she goes back to family, but she goes back also to her earlier son. If the son was from a Kohen. Says the Gemara, Kiman, Rabbi Akiva does Vav, this follow Rabbi Akiva who believes we dash in the Vav, not like Rabbi Shmuel who argues. Says the Gemara, no, even the Rabbanon, Kula Ubas Kroy Seidu. It's not just a letter Vav. The entire word Ubas and the daughter goes back because we're talking about a Bas Kohen, so you have no reason to mention that. So we're Pei Zayin Amid Aleph 4 lines into the Gemara. Says the Gemara, what have we learned? When she goes back to eat truma, she only goes back to eat truma, but the she does not go back. When we say that, she's married to Yisrael, and then her husband died, she goes back home, only for truma, not for chazay b'sheik, not for the korbanos. How do you know that? So we'll have a few psukim. One pasuk it says here, he says betrumas. It's a Bas Kohen. If she marries a Ishzar, is betrumas kochim leisechel. She should never again ever eat from the truma of kochim, the part that you elevate from kochim. What is that? The moment of kochim leisechel, which is the chazay v'sheik, the breast. This is the present to give to a kohen. I'm not going to tell you how I know it from. It says milechem. She goes back home and she eats from the lechem of the teichel. It says mil lechem, from the bread, not all the bread. Maybe it comes to exclude if she was for example, that if she made a neder, and once she leaves the family's house, the father no longer has rights to cancel the neder, and then she goes back home, he doesn't get the right back. That's what it's coming to exclude. That we learn from somewhere else altogether. It says the pasuk, the neder the neder of a woman is a widow or a divorcee. Whatever she says is yokum. She has to keep on her own. Nobody can interfere. What do you have to tell us for? Of course, once she's married, she's no longer under the domain of her father. She's divorced, so she's no longer in the domain of her husband. Of course, she's free. What do you need to tell me that it's free? I was looking about what happens in sort of an interim stage. The father gave over to the agents of the husband, but she's sort of leaving. She left the house of the father, but not completely yet. She did not enter completely the husband's domain. The shluch of the father said the shluch husband, but his armla and his guy she became a widow or divorced. But then on the way, who should have control? Basically, is this still considered, because an interim passage is still considered the father because he didn't yet give it over completely to the husband? Or is she already considered the husband even though she didn't yet completely make that relationship? And let me tell you, once you leave one moment from the house from the father's domain, surely the father loses all control. So I already know that from somewhere else. So what I do with the pasuk, that's why I know that Melechem, when you go back home, Melechem does not come to exclude that he no longer has a right to cancel the Durham. We learn that from somewhere else. Rav Safra, I'll tell you, we learn now. It says melechem of the teichel. It says clearly bread. Not forget the myth from. Just says bread. Lechem lebasa. All she needs is bread and not meat. That's why she doesn't get the carbon. Melechem of the teichel. Lechem hakona. Only that which belonged to her father, and therefore he can pass it on to her. She can eat. Prat l'chazei v'sheik. When it comes to the karbonis and the kohen is entitled to a section of the carbon, that doesn't belong to the kohen. That belongs to Hashem, and Hashem gave it to the kohen as to eat on his behalf. The Meshuchim Gavoy Kazach. The father comes from the Eibishter. The Rabbi says, I'll tell you where I learned from. It says, "It's chazei hatruf v'sheik hatruma." You should eat these parts, the breast and the shank, you should eat after you and your children, your daughter, eat only while they're still with you when they never left. When they're with you, when they left, they lose all that. A ton we learn. She goes back to her family. She goes back to Truma, but the Ein Chazed is Chazed V'Sheik. Just said she does not go back to as a Bas Kohen. So now I'm entitled again to eat from the Chazed V'Sheik of Karbonos. He's not. Bishvil B'No Chazed is Av Chazed V'Sheik. But if she has a son from her husband the Kohen, he's much more powerful, and he entitles her to eat even from the Chazed V'Sheik. He said, I don't understand. Where do you get that from? How do you know? You just said in Gemara before, how do you know that if there's a son, that she can, let's say she had a son from the Kohen and she married a Levi, she forfeits all rights, and then when the Levi and his son died, she goes back to the son of the Kohen. How do you know? We said we learned from Bebas. We learned that when it says she goes back home, it says and, so therefore we say also to the son. So how can the son be more powerful than when she goes back home? How can it be that the son is more powerful than home? Home you only eat from truma, and the son empowers you to eat from kochim as well. Says he, what is that a question? The thing is that we have all these restrictions. Says millechem and all that. When it comes to going back to family, the Torah clearly says not in every respect that you go back. But when it comes to the son, there's no miyutim there, and therefore the miyutim that would apply to the family is not applied to her son from her husband the kohen, and she can eat everything. Bas kohen, she needs to Yisrael. Bas kohen and marry Yisrael. Tell them we learned. The shavuot beisavia. She goes back home only if she's completely go back home. Then she's entitled to truma again if she's a bas kohen. But what about prat? It comes to exclude the shemedes yavam. If she's, let's say, her husband died and now she's waiting for a brother-in-law, even though she didn't marry the brother-in-law, she does not go back home. She cannot eat truma even though she's a bas kohen. Why? She's still attached to the husband's family. Kinurah, it says in the pasuk that what? She goes back home. Kinurah, if she goes back to Kinurah exactly the way it was when she was young. Prat no better, but if she's pregnant, she does not go back home. Even if she doesn't have a child yet. Just madach in a place. Vlad min harishan. The question is, why do we need a pasuk to tell us that if she's pregnant, she doesn't go back home? Mada b'mokim shlei asa Vlad min harishan kevlad min hasheni. When it comes to Yibum, let's say she was married to Reuben, and she had a kid, and then Reuben died. Then she married somebody else. She married Yankel, and she had no kids from Yankel. She still has to marry Yankel's brother. She had a child from a different husband. The child from the first husband has no bearing on the child on the second husband's situation. So the Vlad from the Rishon is weak, and this is something we're going to bring up a number of times in the next page. The Vlad from the Rishon by Yibum is very weak, has no bearing on the second marriage. So we don't treat the child from the first marriage as if it has any bearing whatsoever. The point of even to exclude it from having to do yibum in the second marriage. Yet also but if she is pregnant, she no longer has to do yibum, which tells her that an ibur, a fetus, is much more powerful than a child from a previous marriage. Is mokim also. So when it comes to truma, where the rule is Vlad that what if she was a bas kohen and she was married to Yisrael. And then she married some what do you call it? And then he died, and she married another Yisrael and had no children. She still cannot go back home because she had a child from the first marriage. So if she becomes a truma, the child in the first marriage does have influence on what the outcome is. So Mokum also Vlad ben Sheni, with the first child from does have a bearing on on her situation, and she doesn't go back home, even though she got married again to somebody else, and there's no children. And Truma passes on Truma. And since we know an Ibur is stronger than a child received by Yibum, in addition, I say so surely that an Uber is like a child, and therefore surely she cannot go back home. If a child from the first marriage does not let her go back home, surely if she's pregnant right now, doesn't go back home. I don't need a pasuk for that. What do I need a pasuk kinureh to tell us that she's not pregnant? So you want to know. Mali, I can argue back and say the other way around. Mali also yibum. You know why? When it comes to yibum, we say that an ibur has effect, and you don't have to get married to a brother-in-law because you're pregnant. Why? We have another thing there by yibum. What happens to her husband? She had a child, and her husband died, so she had a child. The next day, the child died. We say that's it. Once you're exempt from Yibum, you're exempt from Yibum. So even though the child died, Mesim, we treat the child as if the child is still alive today and she's exempt from Yibum. So and Nasa Uber Kiyut. So therefore, we see over there that even a dead child is considered alive. So we see that by Yibum, we're pretty weak. Nasa Uber Kiyula Linya Trumas. You want that what? That an Uber should be treated as if she was already born by Truma. Where over there, she had a child from the Kohen. She's a Basisol. She's married to Kohen, had a child for a month, for a year. And then the child died. She can no longer eat. We don't say, oh, well, there's a child when the husband died, so she continues forevermore. No, we don't treat Mesim Kechayim. So therefore, since by Truma we don't treat Mesim Kechayim, maybe also the Mubera has no bearing there either. Because right now, the child wasn't born yet. We look at right now. We need to be told that if she's pregnant, she doesn't go back. We also need to be told that if she had a child, she doesn't go back. If you only knew one, you wouldn't know the other. They had no children. I would say, well, before she was one person, now she's a family with two people, she can't go back. But if she's pregnant, she's still before she was one person, now she's one person. She can continue eating. We need it. Because she's pregnant, before she was just a body that was empty, nothing inside of her. She was from Aliyah, and now she's pregnant. She's not the same person. But if she had children, she herself hasn't changed. Before she had nothing inside her, nothing inside her. So maybe then in that case she could go back to her family because she hasn't really changed. Of course, she has an addition to her family, but she herself didn't change. Therefore, we need both. Says the Gemara. Okay, we're going to ask a number of questions. Ask a number of questions, and they're all based on the principles we just spoke about before. And that is that by Yibum, a child from the first marriage has no bearing on a child on the second marriage. If you had no children from the second marriage, you still need to do Yibum. On the other hand, by Yibum, we have a thing called that Mesim are considered kechayim. But even though the child died a minute after the husband died, like we had in the case of the house collapsed, a minute after the husband died, nevertheless, we say it's as if the child is still alive right now and she is exempt. By Truma, we say that a child from the first marriage does have a bearing. If she was married to Yisrael, and even though she got married again and again and again, and the child from Yisrael is alive, she never goes back home. So the child from the first marriage does have a bearing. But over there also, we say that Mesim are not lechayim. If the child died, then she can go back home. So we're going to ask a number of Kalachayim trying to learn different dinim. Let's say the rule should be like Nasa Mason even white taka. Is it? Well, we should say if Reuven died and you had a child, but 2 months later the child died, now starts the Chiv of Yibum again. And let's make a Kavachayim and goes as follows. By Truma, when we say the child from the first marriage from Yisrael has a bearing even in the future, even though she get married again, the place of Truma does not allow her to eat Truma if the child from Yisrael is still alive, no matter how many times she got married afterwards with no children. You had also Mesim Kechayim, but yet there's a weakness there by Truma that once the child died, we don't say the child is still alive. She's free. So Mokum Shaloi also when it comes to Yibum, where the child from the first marriage has no bearing whatsoever. To exempt it from Yibum, that has no bearing whatsoever. Surely, so surely, once the child is dead, it's dead. Why are we saying that the child, even though it's dead, as if it's alive and she's exempt from Yibum? Therefore, more answer very simply. If you're going to make a rule that a month after Reuven died and she decided to get, she's free now and could have a child and she married somebody else, and then 2 months later, her child from the first husband dies, you're going to say now she's chalitza. Can you imagine her current husband is going to be very upset? Oh, you're still dealing with your previous husband. It's going to upset the whole marriage. And we know is a road of peace. Okay, then further. So okay, so let's make the rule that Meisim Kechayim Le'inyan Truma Kal. Let's make the rule that the other way around. Let's say that Taka, that Meisim should be like Chayim, and let's make that from a Kal regarding Truma. Let's say that about Truma Taka. Okay, if the child died, we should say, let's say she was married to a kohen and the child died, she should be able to continue eating forevermore. The child, once, if as long as the child outlived the father, even if the child died, there's no more yibum. So say here also, the child died. It says if the child is still alive, let it continue Truma. It's very kavachemer. Where the first marriage has no bearing on the second marriage. The point is exempt from yibum. Yet also amazing chayim, if she had a child for the husband and then the child died a day later, she's still exempt from yibum as if she's alive. So makom she'asav by truma, where we say that the child from the first marriage does have a bearing. The poisim and the truma does not allow her to eat truma if, let's say, she was married to Israel and there was a child. Then even though she got married to somebody else afterwards, and the died child, it doesn't matter. And then surely she not that if she was married to a kohen, for example, and the child died, the child is still living on. Or if she's married to Israel and the child died, it's as if the child is still alive, but she shouldn't go back home. It says, the Pasuk clearly says, if there were no children today, it doesn't matter what happened yesterday. So okay, Vlad has no children. Vanasa, okay, next question. Let us make Vlad ben Arishan Vlad ben Asheni Linyan Yibum. Why Taka don't we say that the child from the first marriage, if she had a child from the first marriage and she married somebody else and there were no children, she should be exempt from Yibum Bekal Kalachayman. By Truma, we say that if the child is died, she now can go back home or leading Truma. Or the child died, and let's say was married to a kohen, the child died, you can no longer eat Truma. Even though the child, once it's dead, is dead, yet we say the child of the first marriage does have a bearing on the second marriage of the child. If from a Yisrael, you can never eat again, even though she got married again and then died, you don't go back. Is Mokim Sha'asa Mesig Chaim. When it comes to Yibum, eating Yibum, we say that while the child is alive for a minute, she's exempt. And then surely Shanasa Vlad, but this is then surely that the Vlad from the Rishon should be like the Vlad from the Sheni. Tabalema comes to teach you, no, surely that they should have a bearing from the first marriage or second marriage. Tabalema comes to tell you, Ben Ainlay. She had no children, well, Ainlay, there were no children. So therefore, there's no children, then there's it doesn't matter that you have a child from the previous marriage, she has a mitzvah of Yibum. And another question, so let's say now about Truma, that the first marriage child should not have any bearing if she marries again. That's it. It's over the Truma. When it comes to Yibum, we say that the child was alive for a minute, as if alive still, the point means except for Yibum. Yet, we don't say that the Vlad from the first marriage has any bearing in the second one. If there were no children in the second marriage, just to get married even again. So Mokim Shalei Asa Mesim Gechaim, in a place where the dead are not like living, which is by Truma, linear Truma, and surely that there should be Shalei Nasa Vlad and the that should have no bearing. Just because she was married to a kohen and had a child, if she married somebody else, that's it. It ends that relationship. Tamalem Ain Law, well, yes, she has no children at all anywhere, but she does have a child. Okay, now we start a new paradigm, which is totally different. So about a case where a woman was told that her husband died, she got remarried, and then suddenly her husband comes back or she finds that her husband's alive. What happens here? So it depends on what ground she got remarried. It was on grounds of a single witness, and there usually we need two witnesses, but we're going to be lenient because we don't want agunas. So we don't allow her to get married, and we believe that she'll do her homework and make sure that everything is all right. Because the consequences are, if it's wrong, if it's not true, then her second marriage is illicit, and children will be mamzerim. So she'll make sure that her husband Taka is dead. But if there were two witnesses, and based on their testimony, she got married, then it's like an anus, it's an accident, and it's a whole different story. So let's see the mission. Haisha, a woman, husband overseas, but they came, but they told her, a single witness came and said, your husband died. The Nisa, based on that account, she got married, then suddenly your husband turned up. What happens? She cannot live anymore with a second husband because she's a married woman. But nor can she now go back to the first husband, because when you commit adultery, it's also to your first husband, also the second one. You also need a divorce on both of them. You need a divorce on the second one because she got married. And we'll see later the Gemara if the second marriage is not really valid because she was a married woman, you need a divorce because Maris Ain, people shouldn't say things. And from the first one, for sure she needs a divorce because her husband's still alive. The ain ksuba, because she got married to this person when she was a married woman, she forfeits a ksuba. Paydas, she doesn't get any provisions. Paydas means all the estate, the assets that she brought in, and the husband took all the dividends. She doesn't get it back, even though the whole marriage was a sham. Nor does she get provided for. We had this before. Nor does she take back any of the materials that they have, rotted over the time. Where Rashi learns, and neither husband. She doesn't even get a ksuba from the first husband either. And if she did take from them, she has to return it. Vlad Mamzer, the child of Mamzer from the second husband, the first husband goes back to her and they live together, they have new children, it'll be Mamzer as well, according to Tanakama, Midrabban. This is all the Tanakama, others will soon disagree. If they're Kohanim, they're not allowed to go ahead to her funeral. I have no rights in her as well, not in anything that she finds, not in her earnings, not to cancel another Nadarim, even though it affects them. If she was a Bas Yisrael, Nifshel in Akuna, she cannot marry a Kohen because she's now considered a Zoina, because she was a married one. Ubas Levi, and if she's a Bas Levi, we penalize her that she forfeits her Maisa. And the Bas Kohen, if she's a Bas Kohen, we penalize her min hatruma. This is all midrabanan. We penalize them by having such strong consequences. She'll make sure that she does all the homework properly. Then Yoshi's looks about and know whether Yasha inherits a ksuba. The obvious question is, if we just said before she's not entitled to ksuba, what do you mean they don't inherit a ksuba? So tomorrow we'll talk about it later. Yimeisu, and she died. If the husbands died, if they died, neither of them do any can marry her, but they do give chalitza. Especially the first husband, obviously it was a proper marriage, give chalitza, but it's Tanakama no yibum because it's she's now forbidden to him. And the second husband, she also needs chalitza because of Maris, as we'll see later. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. He says, why should she forfeit the ksuva of her first husband? They were married legitimately, she was entitled to it. Rabbi Elazar disagrees as well. They all disagree regarding the first husband, because the Tanakama comes up very strong against the first husband as well. And he's totally, an accident. Rabbi Elazar says, Harishon Zakai b'mitziyosa, the first husband is still entitled to anything she finds, her earnings, and canceling, annulling her vows. Rav Shimon says that the first husband's brothers, if he dies, can marry her. Be asa, she can have yibum oichalitzasa me'echav shalishin paitera tzarasa. They say no. The first husband is allowed to live with her, and therefore there's a mitzvah of yibum there. She can even marry one of the first husband. They ain't allowed men mamzin. If the first husband takes her back, the child is not be a mamzin. The im nisa shalei b'shus. Let's say she got married without permission of Bezdin. In other words, two witnesses came along. If two witnesses come and tell you a story, you don't have to go to Bezdin to get a sanction. If two witnesses told you that your husband has died, your husband has died, and she got married on her own. And then suddenly the husband comes back. This is total accident. She relied on two witnesses. The Torah says you can rely on witnesses. She can go back to her first husband, even according to Tanakama. What about Nisa's Alpi Bezin? So there's a single witness. She had to go to court. She can't just rely on a single witness. Go to court, and Bezin ruled, yes, go ahead and marry. And then the husband comes back. Tate says she has to leave, as we just said, but it's not her fault because she listened to a Bezin. Loin is with Bezin, but if she, let's say, followed the two witnesses and she got married, Tate say, and then her husband comes back. Okay, it's not her fault, but she cannot stay married to the second husband, obviously. The chayev is bekarbon, but in this case, because you weren't following a Bezin, you just followed yourself. You did your own. You took your law in your own hands. You have to bring a carbon like a shaygig. Yafukai Bezin, the advantage of going to Bezin even with a single age, you listen to the Bezin, they rule, and therefore you're exempt from a carbon. What happened? The Bezin said, okay, you're a single witness, go ahead and get married. And instead of getting married, she married somebody she shouldn't have. Let's say she was a Kohen, married a divorcee. Let's say if she was a Bas Kohen, she married somebody that she shouldn't have married. She married she married, let's say she herself was a divorcee from another marriage and she married a Kohen. Or she was now she's a widow and she married a Kohen Gadol. Chayev is the carbon. Then this exemption of not having to bring a carbon because you listen to Bezin doesn't count. So they said you should marry in a proper way. You didn't. Says the Gemara, but it says in the end, if she got married without condition that was based on two witnesses. She can go back to the first husband. Bezin means without permission of Bezin, so why did you marry? You marry because you followed witnesses. So the beginning of the mission when it says Bishus Bezin, you did follow the Bezin. You didn't go with witnesses. You don't need a Bezin. Obviously, talking about a single aid. So what we see from this mission is that a single aid is believed, even though till now she was a married woman. A single aid can come along and overturn something that has been established for years. But and we want to know, where do we know that a single witness has such powers, such credibility to go against a chazaka, an established chazaka? We also learned we also say that what you can, when it comes to a guna, want to help out, even if a witness repeats hearsay from another witness, or isha repeat isha, or a woman repeating something from another woman, even though there might not be kosher ladies, isha be evident from a slave and pishicha from a maid. Alma eight echem. We see clearly when it comes to a woman to setting her free, and a guna, even the single aid is enough. So in other words, an aid is believed. I'm going to bring another proof that an aid is believed. One aid said the 8 trefa fats, and he said I did not eat trefa fats. He's exempt from being carbon. 1 against 1. And he knows. Only because he said I didn't eat. If he would have said nothing, we would believe that single witness, and he would have to bring a carbon. And the chiddush is, if you bring an animal to the base of Mikdash, which is not a carbon, you committed a sin. You brought chulin to the base of Mikdash. But here we'll say the carbon is a real carbon because a single witness said so. Again, we see that a single witness can establish a situation. How do you know? How do you know you believe when it's against a chazak and so on? The Tanya, we learned, says a pasuk, if a person became a din aveda, that he came known to him, that he committed a sin, that he brings a carbon. Not others told him, you yourself have to realize that you made a mistake. I would have thought if a witness comes in and says you did something and I say nothing, I'm also exempt because I was told by somebody else. Don't say that he knew, it says that it became known to him. Even someone else made you aware of it, it's enough to bring your carbon. So how does it work? Hey, Chidami, if 2 people come along and say, listen, you ate trefa fats, and he doesn't contradict them, I need a pasuk to tell me I've got to bring a carbon. What happened? A single witness came along and said that you ate trefa fats. The key, and if you don't contradict them, then even though you became aware through them, but now that they made you aware, you didn't contradict them, then they believe. Shmamna, what does he clear from here? A single aid is believed to establish facts. So therefore, again, we bring you 2 or 3 different proofs that a single aid is believed. We want to know what the source is. So before we move on with the sources, Gemara asks, who told you that the reason if you're quiet, you have to, and to the aid and the battery fats, you have to bring a carbon is because we believe the aid. Maybe your silence is testimony that you yourself are saying, I ate a tray of fats. So the reason why I bring a carbon is not because of what the aid says, it's because of what you said. Silence is also is speaking in high volume. Because you believe, maybe because you're quiet, and silence is like as if you're admitting it. Taylor proved you. The Tony Sefer, it says later on, fascinating halacha. If 2 witnesses come along and say you ate tray of fats, I did not eat tray of fats. Potter, you are Potter. If you say I did not eat tray of fats, you are Potter. We believe you more than 2 witnesses. The mayor says, of course we don't believe you. You have to follow the witnesses and bring a carbon. The mayor says, I'll prove it to you. If 2 people come along and say you murdered somebody, we're going to kill you. We shouldn't believe the witnesses when they say you ate tray for fats. They said to him, what happens if he would have said, yes, I ate tray for fats. I'm not contradicting what you're saying, but I did it deliberately, so I cannot bring a carbon. We would believe him. So now, the Machlekes Rashi Taisa how to learn. So Taisa says we're going to reinterpret his words. That when he said that I didn't eat, he's not contradicting the witnesses. What he meant was I did not eat it by mistake. I ate it knowing exactly what it was, and if I don't bring a carbon. But Rashi learns we actually believe him because of a migli. If he's a liar, he could have just said, yes, I ate it, bemazed. And now that he said I didn't eat it at all, we believe this person, which is very difficult, as all the Rishonim ask. A migli cannot be more powerful than 2 witnesses. But anyway, Reisha, tomorrow goes back. Is Reisha my time become a Chaim Rabbanon? So now in the Reisha, when you say that he's quiet, he has to bring a carbon. If the reason is because he's believed, but today in the first part is talking about there were 2 witnesses. There were 2 witnesses that generally come along anyway, and they say something. That's a fact. We don't care if you contradict that. Let's say that you murdered somebody. No, I didn't. Of course, we're going to believe witnesses. To believe witnesses. the kapatri rabbanon, and there are yet the rabbanon say over here that they are exempt. And the lav, the why is it in the first case over here he's believed? Mishum the ishtik must be because he was quiet, not because of what the witnesses testify. Because in this case over here, if he contradicts them, he wouldn't bring a carbon. So now that he's quiet, he does. It's not because of the witnesses. It's because his silence is as if he's testifying about himself. So this particular story doesn't prove that a witness is believed, a single witness is believed. So the Gemara goes back and says, so how do we know that a witness is believed? It can't be from this story here about the facts, because it's not we believe the witness, we believe him, his silence. And the Gemara says very simple. Svaru. It's a simple logic. If we do not trust a single witness, how can you ever eat in your house? How do you know that your wife gave you kosher food? Maybe she gave you a tray for food. Obviously, because we believe them, and a single person is believed when it comes to Isurim. So it's a svaru. Otherwise, you can't live. So the Gemara immediately have a chatichas, like anywhere we find a chatichas, selfish, we have a piece. You're not sure if it's kosher or not kosher. And a single witness comes and says, I know for a fact that it is kosher. The mehem is believed. So we see clearly from here that that's how life is. If somebody comes along and says kosher, we definitely believe them. Says the Gemara, so it's logic. Says the Gemara, me dummy. How can you compare our cases to that case over there? Hasam is chazik yasuda. We don't know if it's kosher or straight, so therefore we believe a witness. Hach is chazik yasuda. This is a married woman till now, and because this woman was a married woman till now, how do you know you believe? You believe the witness. Says the Gemara, the Eichadish. Question number one is she was a married woman till now. Everyone knew that. So now a witness comes along and says she's not. How do you know you can believe him? That's question number one. When do you know that an Eidech you believe against the Yisur? And number two, the Ein Dovish Rebbe Pachim Mishnayim. We also have a rule when it comes to matters of marriage, you need two witnesses. So question number two, where are your two witnesses? If anything, if you want to compare our case of a married woman, I'll tell you what you compare it to. I'll tell you we compare it to a piece, the Vadechela, we know for a fact that's definitely treif fats. And a witness comes along and says, I know for a fact that it's kosher. Nobody believes him. He's going because he's going against an established fact. So the Gemara says, so therefore the Gemara asking, how do we believe an Eid by a married woman? So the Gemara comes along and says, your comparison of a married woman to a case where it's established treif fats is totally wrong. Hassam over there, I feel also made If 100 people come along and say that it's not treif, we know that it is, it's not going to make a difference. If two people come along and say, yes, over here, yesterday she was married, but we can undo the marriage. You can give a divorce, or the husband can pass away. So if two witnesses come along and say that she's no longer married, of course you believe them. So you're not going against the established Isser. You're saying that established Isser came to an end. When it comes to treif, it never comes to an end. So of course we don't believe them. But over here it can come to an end. So therefore, why should you believe if one witness does the same thing, that a witness comes along and said that she was no longer married, the husband died, we should believe him. Media, I'll give you an example. Just like we find a tevel, when it comes to tevel, a tevel could be any. These are three things that we're going to give cases that can be fixed up. So we see that we can believe in eight. What's it called? Tevel, the case of tevel, comes along and says that whether they gave truma, they gave ma'aser or not. Even though till now we know that it was usher, but they said, look, the truma ma'aser were given, you can eat from it. And by kutchim thing, by kudlis, we make a vow. So the Gemara goes through each one, and the Gemara basically disprove it and say this proves nothing, because in all of those cases, the reason why you believed it is because you yourself can fix it right now. It's in your control. So therefore, if you tell us that happened, we believe you. Over here, the witnesses have no control to free this woman. If the husband's dead, is dead, and if the husband has to give the divorce, the husband divorce. The witness can't do anything about it. It's not in their control. So who said that we believe a single witness once against an established fact? And so that's the most question. So high tevel either day if it's his own tevel, he says control. Of course, he believes him. Ella, in fact, there's a big machlek is not him. The Shemais and others whether the other means is that like testimony or could that's ownership. Ella, the acha belongs to somebody else. So my kasav, what do you hold? If I'm allowed to walk into your field and give on your behalf without your permission, so again, shouldn't be the other it's in my control. I can fix it up. So therefore, I'm believed because I'm in control. But if the rule is I need your permission, so I have no control, who says I'm believed? If a guy comes along and says, yes, I know this is no longer tevel, who said it's believed? That's my question. Maybe he's not believed. Your case of Hegdish, same thing. If it's something that I just donated the value, I can always redeem it. Again, I'm in control. So if I'm telling you that this happened, you believe me. If let's say it's a carbon idea, again, where the animal itself is wholly dedicated to the Mizbeach, So either day, and if it's mine, again, I have control. How do I have control? And Mission to be Lichula, I have the right to go to a Rav and say, you know what, I made a promise to give this race a English. I want to undo my promise. So again, I'm in total control. Eladacha belongs to somebody else. And he says, and I say, look, I know that this happened, that they went to the Rav and they undid, it's no longer holy. He goes, no, who Taka said you believe? Third case, Kunmas Nabi, a guy made a vow, like a carbon, but in the expression of a vow, if you hold yesh mila that kumas what is like considered hegdish, and therefore it's like stealing base of English. And therefore it becomes holy, and you have to give the value to the base of English. You can always redeem it. Again, that's why if I tell you that it's been redeemed, you believe me because in my control. Because if you tell me what is not become whole, it's not become holy, and there's no stealing. If I use it for myself, just purely an Isa that I have on my shoulders. So again, either day, if it's mine, the other I can go to Rav and undo my vow. Eladach loves somebody else. But Aman, he says, I know for a fact, I know Yadina, the Ichu Maria that he went to Rav and he undid his vow. No, who he given on? That's my question. Who said he believed? Omar said, you know why in the case of the woman, if you believe the single aid, you saw how strict we became, but if it turned out to be their husband really was alive and he comes back, look at all the consequences. So therefore we decided to reduce, to make it easier for her to get remarried. Instead of having two witnesses, one witness is enough. And therefore we're sure that she'll exhaust all her abilities to find out if it's true or not true. So that's why we believe in 1-8, because also of her input, as if we're believing her. So the Gemara, why you decide to be, don't be strict at the end and don't be lenient in the beginning. So the Gemara should be guna ikula barabanan, because we don't want to see a woman in our guna. We decided to relax the law that you don't need two witnesses, one witness is sufficient. Says the Gemara, if the husband comes back, she has to leave the second husband, but also the first husband. Rav made an interesting comment, and the one is going to try to understand. Only if she married based on a single witness. If in the case where two witnesses came along and said your husband died, and she remarried, you don't have to leave. Now, right now the Gemara thinks you don't have to leave the second husband, and the Gemara doesn't understand. They smiled. Also, Gavra, they were so laughing, mocking him. Also, Gavra, the husband standing there and saying, "Look, I'm here. I never died." And you tell me she can stay married to the second husband because she listened to two witnesses. Doesn't make sense. Talking about a case where we don't recognize, it's been years and years and years, and suddenly he reappears and no one recognizes him. And therefore, if he's married based on two witnesses, she doesn't have to leave the second husband. So why are you telling me, but if it's only a single witness, she has to leave the second husband? Well, why? Nobody knows it's really the husband. Also by today, this is what happened. Two people came along and said, we know that this is the husband because we've been with him for years and years. From then till today, we were traveling together, got stuck, couldn't get back. It took us 10 years to find our way back. We know for a fact it's the husband. So if a single witness said your husband died and she remarried, and now two witnesses come along and said, we know this is your husband, and you just don't recognize him because we find the situation. See what it says. Yosef recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. Now, why is that possible? When he left, he was a youngster, didn't have a beard. But when they saw him again, he did have a beard. But all of his brothers were older than him, they already had beards, so he recognized them. So he must have safe. So even let's say the two witnesses say, well, if two witnesses told her that she can stay, that your husband dead, she can stay married to the second guy. But now you have two against two. You have two who say that your husband's dead, and you have two people say this is your husband. So why can't she stay or remain married to the second guy? So you say if it's two against two, if it's two against two, so how come she can remain married to the second guy? In fact, they live together since now we don't know which way it is. We don't know what's the truth. It's called an Asham Talib. Whenever you don't know if you committed a sin, you bring an Asham Talib. How can she remain married to the second guy? Here we're talking about a case here is where she married one of the witnesses who said that her husband died. And therefore, when do you bring an Asham Tali if you're not sure? But that witness is 100% convinced that your husband is dead. And you believe him, so therefore you're 100% convinced your husband is dead. Therefore, there's no Isser of Asham Tali. It's two against two. And now that you're married, you stay married. What about herself? She herself doesn't know who to believe. By Meda's bodily, she feels that this a lot of Adam are correct. Her husband is dead. So the mother, if so, what's the chiddush? If two witnesses said that 2 against 2, and she married one of the witnesses that says 100% your husband is dead, and she believes it as well. So what's the chiddush and we don't know if this man standing here is her husband or not. So what's the chiddush that she doesn't have to go out of the marriage? So the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman Rav Yesi, what's the chiddush? Afilu Rav Nachman Rav Yesi. We'll see in a minute. Rav Nachman Rav Yesi. There's an argument if two witnesses say yes and two witnesses say no when it comes to her, whether she's allowed to marry or not. Even according to Rav Nachman Rav Yesi, that says that she has to leave the marriage. Like Amar, it only says it in the case Kishivo Eidim. First, the witnesses came, the 2 against 2, and then she decided to get married once the doubt has been established. Then Menachem says, you can't stay married. You ruined the doubt. You should have married.
Sorry for interrupting. I just realized you didn't break for the day, for another day.
Oh, so let's stop here, and then we'll start with straight again. Okay. Okay, cool, Lennon, Ablak Gemara. This is Friday's Gemara and that Peiches Amaral. We'll stop at Peiches. We'll stop at Peiches of the base. We're talking about a case where Rav came along, and Rav said that if there were 2 witnesses that said that her husband died and she married and she got married, and that 2 witnesses come along and say, "This is your husband. He's right here. He's alive. We're with him the whole time, even though you don't recognize this is him." The din is she can stay married. And we said the only way that can be is if she married one of the witnesses, so she's convinced 100% that this is correct. So says now the Gemara. So what's the chiddush then? If she got married to one of the witnesses that they believe that just the truth, the husband is dead, of course she can remarry. So we're saying that we're according to Menachem, even according to Menachem Yesi. Menachem Yesi says that if the 2 witnesses that say that your husband died, 2 witnesses said your husband didn't die. So now we don't know, right? It's a doubt. If she then proceeds to marry somebody, she has to leave that marriage because she had no right to get married when there was a doubt. But in this case here, we're talking about 2 witnesses came along and said your husband died, and she married one of the witnesses. And then a week later, 2 other witnesses come along with a man and said, this is your husband. Because when she married legitimately, everyone will agree she doesn't have to leave. So that's what Rav is telling us. So the Gemara, what's our chiddush in fact? It's so obvious. So 3 lines on top of the page, base. So, remember, what's the chiddush? Even Nachman says he has to leave the marriage. It's talking about when witnesses came and afterwards she got married. But she got married first, and then witnesses came. He never said that. The Tanya we learned. 2 people come along and say your husband died. 2 people say your husband didn't die. 2 people say that you're divorced. She cannot get married because you're a doubt. But the Im Nisa, if she did get married, like Tate said, because we don't know which 2 to believe. So the rabbis say that she shouldn't get married because 2 say that she shouldn't. But now that she did get married, since 2 say that she could get married, we're not going to tell her to leave. Comes along and but Rav Yesi, he says Tate say no. And Nachman Yesi says she has to leave the marriage because she had no right to get married in the first place. He says, when do I say Tate she has to leave the marriage? Bisman Shabo Eidim, but both sets of Eidim came along and then she got married. But if she got married first and then came along witnesses, so she did the right thing. She got married legitimately, and then afterwards trouble came about. Now that she's there, let her stay. So what's Rav's chiddush? That's exactly what Rav was talking about. Rav was talking about Bisman Shabo Eidim. Rav is saying that the witnesses came and she got married. No, first it was a doubt, and she got married. And I want you to know that the rule is not like Rabbi Menachem Bar Yesi, but rather like the Chachamim. That even though she shouldn't have got married, but if she did, she could stay married because there were 2 witnesses that supporting her story. To show that Allah is not like Rabbi Menachem Bar Yesi. That's one way of understanding. Or you could argue the other way. The only reason is the Nisa Vakamayim. Rav is talking about a case where there were one set of witnesses that said that you're free and she married, and then the other set of witnesses came along, says Rav, you don't have to leave the marriage. But the reason why I'm telling you this, I want you to know the halacha is like Rabbi Nachum, Rabbi Yesi. But there were 80 first that was established as a problem. Teitze, come on, Kiram Nachum Bar Yesi. So I think Rav asked the question. It says in the Braise, it says, how do you know? Let's say that she doesn't want to leave the marriage. Daphne, how do you know she doesn't want to leave the marriage? You actually push her away. We'll learn the word Daphne means to push away. He says, it says, it says that what if we kidashtoy, you have to make them holy, you have to make sure that they remain, they follow the rules all the time. So we're talking about here a bas kohen. We're talking about a kohen who married someone that he shouldn't have married, So we say Kidash Toy Bal Korcha. We force the Kohen to divorce her, right? To do the right thing. So we say here, what are you talking about? If you tell me that she did not marry to one of the witnesses, like and she does not say, I know 100% that the witness that my husband's dead is 100% right. You have to tell me that we force them. Daphne literally means we beat them. That we force them to divorce. She herself says, I don't know who's telling the truth. Of course, she has to leave. The niece is and what it says that she married one of the witnesses, and Ukama Barley, and she says, and then I know 100% that this witness who said my husband's dead is correct. Yet it says, Tony Daphne, it says you have to what? You have to force them to divorce. Alma mafkina lemonade. We're talking about if the Kohen, if she ended up marrying a Kohen, and we see clearly that we forced them to divorce. How can you say that? How can Rav say that you stay married? Says, well, it's not a question. Isa kuhuna shiny, because when it comes to a Kohen, things are very different. We're much stricter with the rules, and we're very particular about who he marries, and therefore we can force them to divorce. Or I can tell you, my Daphne, who said that Daphne means that we actually force them to divorce. We was Daphne Be'edim. We say, go find more witnesses to corroborate your story that your husband is dead and that the first pair of witnesses are not telling the truth. And this is in order to make sure that the Kohen does the right thing. But that's before they got married. But once they got married, like Rav said, they can stay married. Or there was the reason why in this case we forced the divorce. The suffix has been established. Both sets of witnesses came, and then afterwards they got married. Rav Ashi says, I have another pshat in Rav. I believe that when he said she doesn't have to leave, she's not talking about don't leave the second husband. That what it means is that she doesn't have to go, she can go back to the first husband. In a case, what Rav is saying here is if she followed two witnesses and she married a second husband, and then her husband comes back, that Rav is saying not only that it's not her fault and everything else, but she goes back to her first husband. And she goes back to her husband. It says that in our Mishnah. Not in our Mishnah. If she married without a bezdin because she relied on two witnesses, she can go back to her husband. And that's what our Mishnah says. In fact, that's the halacha. She can go back to the first husband. It's not her fault. She listened to witnesses. She can go back. And she didn't commit adultery. Says the Gemara, you're right. When Rav didn't really say both things. One was said, another one we just understood. Omar Shmuel says Shmuel. This is all talking about this is all talking about that nobody contradicted it. When our Mishnah says that you have to leave, it's talking about when she didn't contradict it. But if she contradicted it, this is a comment he made, which is very cryptic. He said, when do we say that she has to leave the second husband if she didn't contradict the witness or witnesses? But if she did contradict it, says she doesn't have to leave. Now, Maiska, what are we talking about here? Which case doesn't, if she contradicts, I don't believe the witness says she doesn't have to leave. Today, we're talking about that. Two people came along and said, your husband is still alive. So what if she said, I don't believe them? So what? The fact is we believe the witnesses. Ella bechad. If there was a single witness came along and said your husband is still alive, and she said, I don't believe you, seemed like time the mechashta because she contradicts the single witness. Ha shoska teitze. But if let's say what happened was one witness came along and said your husband died, and she got married. Comes along another witness and says your husband is still alive. And if she doesn't, and Shmuel is saying if she doesn't contradict that second witness, she has to leave the second husband. Says the Gemara, didn't Ula say, Ula made a rule. Wherever the Torah says we believe single witnesses, he takes on the full credibility of two witnesses. So the first witness said your husband is dead, you believe like two witnesses. And then the second witness comes along and says that your husband is still alive is one against two. Of course, we believe the two witnesses. So why should she leave her husband? So it's a hochamai skin. We're talking about a case, the psule eders. We're talking about a case where the witnesses were pasula eders. Ukid Ram Nechemia, like Ram Nechemia. We'll stop over here and continue tomorrow. We'll do tomorrow and just tomorrow's block and this little piece over here.